Today on Locked On Red Wings radio voice Ken Kal joins to recap the offseason and look ahead to the 24-25 year.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a color commentator for the Oakland University hockey team, while Scotty is the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. Today, we are happy to have back on Ken Kal, the Detroit Red Wings radio voice. You can hear him on 97.1 The Ticket as this season is quickly approaching here. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to join us again to do another offseason recap / preseason preview. How has your summer been and what you up to?
Well, enjoyed the summer. Just got back from an Alaska cruise with my wife, so that was really exciting, and I would definitely do it again. The boat's put away, and that means that hockey season is among us and upon us, so I'm ready to go. It was a great weekend last weekend. We were up in Traverse City. Bob Kaiser, voice of the Griffins, and myself called the action in the Prospects games against the Dallas Stars. Red Wings were 2-0 and actually played really well. Carter Geilander in goal was just terrific in his play. Landon Miller came in kind of to play the last half of the second game, but overall, very impressed with the youngsters. And really, when you think about it, these guys, they get together, not a lot of practice time, and you could tell off the get-go that they were a little bit rusty, but as the game wore on, I thought the Red Wings were the stronger team. So things are looking good in the camp as far as the prospects for Detroit.
Absolutely. And we'll get into more of the prospects as well as talk about big acquisitions for the NHL, the Red Wings big name club. And but first, I got to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a three-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Scotty, why don't you lead us off here with our questions for Ken Kal? What do you got loaded up for the People's Announcer?
The People's Announcer, baby. Yeah, well, I mean, as Brian said, we've been talking a lot on here just about the offseason that was, and then obviously we're in that, kind of slowly but surely turning into looking ahead at this season. I guess we'll start with the offseason that was. Just kind of give your general thoughts and opinions on what the Wings did. Obviously, this year there wasn't maybe the giant splash that came last year with like adding DeBrincat or whatnot, but like still Vlad, and then a lot of really solid players up and down the lineup. So kind of just talk about your takeaways from the offseason and who you think the biggest additions the Wings made, I guess, are.
Well, I thought the Red Wings tried to move some salary to try and get a free agent in, a big name free agent, but it just seemed like that didn't work out. But overall, I thought the Red Wings brought in some pretty solid players. Tarasenko, I'm excited about him. I think he's going to provide some offense, especially on the power play for Detroit, coming off a Stanley Cup championship with the Florida Panthers. So that leadership and the ability to know what it takes to win is going to be exciting to see from him. I thought the Red Wings, again, added to their goaltending core as Cam Talbot now will join the ranks. I thought Lyon did a really good job last year in goal. We're hoping Ville Husso can come back, and he was injured for most of the season. Maybe he'll be healthy coming into this season, but again, it looks like they might go with a 3-goalie rotation to start the season. Tyler Mott would add a little strength there on the fourth line for Detroit. Eric Gustafsson back on the blue line is a guy that's a stay-home typical defensive type defenseman, but I think the Red Wings need a couple of those guys, and they certainly got it in him, and he's got a lot of experienced veteran players. So overall, not a big splash in free agency, but again, I think the Red Wings have what it takes offensively and now defensively to really have a good year and a solid year.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing too is like you mentioned that they got Vladimir Tarasenko in, and he's going to help with offense up front, 2-time Stanley Cup winner. But on the back end, they lost Shane Gostisbehere, somebody who had 50-plus points on the defensive side of the puck for the Detroit Red Wings this last year, played power play unit 1. when they brought in Eric Gustafsson, it felt like that was kind of their attempt to replace that offense, well, maybe being a little bit better defensively. But I want to hear your thoughts on, and we'll talk about Moritz Seider's contract situation maybe a little bit later. But as a player, do you think Moritz Seider can step into that power play one role? I know it was largely ghosts last year, but as he steps forward in his development, you think that could be his role going forward?
Well, absolutely. I think he's going to be a good all-around player, both offensively and defensively. Keep in mind, he's still a young player and he still has a lot to learn. I'm going to miss Gostisbehere back on the blue line because those points that he generated, those are going to be hard to duplicate from anybody. And, he was a little bit weak defensively, but offensively pretty gifted. And if you look at the Red Wings offensive numbers, the goals they scored, the power play was terrific last year, I thought. I don't know if those numbers will be there this year. Now, with that said, I think the emphasis going into the season this year is not so much putting the puck in the back of the net. They still have players that can do that with Larkin and Kane and Tarasenko, DeBrincat, but they need to keep the puck out of the net, which means their goaltenders have to come up big. Their defensemen have to play well in front of the goal, make that first outlet pass to get the forwards going. And also the forwards have to have more responsibility of playing back in their own zone. And, at times last season, I thought the Red Wings, the forwards needed to come back more and help out defensively. And sometimes, to be honest, some of the offensive-minded players were cheating for offense, and you just can't win on a regular basis. The Red Wings had a really good season. They ended up with 91 points. They continue to get better, and I assume the Red Wings will be right around that point again this year. Will it be enough to make the playoffs? We'll have to wait and see.
Well, you mentioned that was very close to my next question there, but you mentioned the amount of goals that walked out versus walking in. A lot more walked out than walked in, and especially again when you look at kind of the depth scoring that the Wings got last year from the second, third, and fourth lines, that they had a lot of those guys walk away, but they replaced them with defense. Is that I guess my question is just in general, how do you feel about that emphasis on defense? And is that an offseason strategy that you think is going to play out well for them this year?
Well, at the exits interviews last year, Steve Yzerman was talking to the media, and he said that we got to be better defensively. And Derek Lalonde said the same thing, too. You think back 2 years ago, the Red Wings played well defensively, but they couldn't score. And they were losing a lot of games 2-1, 3-2. And then last year they were blowing out teams, but they were guilty too of allowing some goals as well. With that said, I think Lyon did a really good job in goal. I mean, if he didn't play the way he played, this team would never be close to making the playoffs. So, the question right now is, can he do it again? And can a veteran goaltender like Cam Talbot come in and do what he did with the Los Angeles Kings? Now, granted, the Kings were a better defensive team than the Red Wings, so his work's going to be cut out unless the Red Wings play well in front of him. And again, we mentioned Ville Husso as a goaltender that needs to be healthy, and we'll have to wait and find out if he is. But I don't know. I think in order to win in the National Hockey League, you got to be in the top 10 defensively, in top 10 in goals against. You can score 1,000 goals, but that doesn't guarantee anything. And the best way to win those close games and to be a good playoff team is you got to be able to shut down the other team. I like the way the Red Wings are built, to be honest with you. If you look at the top two lines, we mentioned those players, Tarasenko, Larkin, DeBrincat. If they all stay healthy, they should be able to get their share of goals. And then you look at down the middle, I think the Red Wings have some pretty solid centers now. You've got Compher and Kopp. Kopp's a good two-way player. And that's the key, too, is Daniel Sprong scored a lot of goals last year, but he limited himself to offense and not defense. And that's what we need from the third and fourth line this year is we need players that can play on both ends of the ice. You may have to give up a little bit of offense, but when you're up by a pair of goals in the third period, you have to be able to shut the other team down. And I think that's the focus that the Red Wings are looking at going into this new season.
100% agree. Everything that you just said are things that Scotty and I have echoed so much on our own show here. So hearing you say that's a little bit reassuring on our own opinions. But you mentioned two big things there before we get to break here. The goalie situation, I agree with you. That's going to be a really fascinating thing going into this next season because you did bring in Cam Talbot, but you have another year left of Ville Husso and Alex Lyon. And Alex Lyon was huge. In particular, that month of January, he was one of, if not the best goalie in the National Hockey League. He was playing insane. And, he has a track record of kind of going on hot streaks like that. If you look at Florida Panthers the year prior, when he basically got them into the playoffs single-handedly. I think it's all going to revolve around Ville Husso. Like, Ville Husso is getting paid the most money out of any goaltender. At the time, it was a bridge contract, sure, for the Red Wings to try and get have a goalie until Sebastian Cossa gets here, at least in my estimation. Obviously, I'm not in the front office. I don't know that. But like with if Ville Husso can have a nice bounce back year and he looks good in camp, then I think it's really up in the air on who your 3 goalies are going to be, or who your 2 goalies are going to be that are going to be getting the most ice time going into the year. I think Cam Talbot, as of right now, is probably that 1A, not like 1, but like 1A and 1B type situation. But who that 1B is going to be could completely be thrown off kilter if Ville Husso looks sharp. The other thing you mentioned, too, I really liked the high-powered offense. You mentioned that in the National Hockey League, you got to have a really good defense to make it into playoffs. And the Red Wings last year were 10th highest. I think they had the 10th most goals, but the 9th most goals against. The year before that, the Buffalo Sabres, who just barely missed the playoffs, same issue. Yeah. So I think that you're spot on with those comments, Ken, and that's those are the areas that are going to be the biggest areas of concern for the Red Wings going forward, is if they can fix those issues.
Well, the other thing, too, about the goaltending situation is the Red Wings have a lot of depth. And you look at Jack Campbell. He was a guy that the Red Wings picked up, veteran goaltender, been around the National Hockey League. He'll be out probably start the season in Grand Rapids. But again, with the injury issues that seem to plague the Red Wings in goal, you have a lot of depth now. Kossa's been continuing to improve, and I thought he had a really good year. His year last year kind of was the same as he had in Toledo. He started off a little slow, but then, man, he came on like gangbusters and, wouldn't lose hockey games. So he's developing. And the other goaltender down the road that I really like is Trey Augustine. I've seen him in development camps and watched his career closely at Michigan State, and he's going to be a really solid goalkeeper. So the Red Wings are really just buying some time over the next couple of years until guys like Cossa and Augustine can down the road be your top 2 goaltenders.
Yeah, completely agree. Scotty, let's go to a quick break, and when we return, I want to kind of get into who you think the biggest breakout candidate is for the Detroit Red Wings, since we're talking so much about youth right now. So stay tuned for segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. You've heard us talk about them. They are America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have a little something different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit FanDuel.com. Download America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Yeah, Ken, as far as the youth goes on this roster, like some of the goals that walk out, I feel like the Red Wings may be expecting internal growth to replace, and you're going to have 3 players get promotions from the AHL at a minimum with Edvinsson, Berggren, and Albert Johansson. Who do you see as, and it doesn't have to be relegated to just those 3, but who do you see on the Red Wings roster right now as the biggest candidate to have a breakout year?
Well, I look at Lucas Raymond, and he had a great year last year, but now that he's getting paid, he's the kind of guy that needs to step it up, and I think he should have a breakout year for Detroit. Certainly he was the kind of guy that took the team on his back last year, if you remember, when Dylan Larkin was injured. So he has that leadership capability into him. And now that the Red Wings are paying him for a long period of time, it's up to him to step up and show the team and management what he can do. And I thought he showed signs of that. The young players, it's a learning experience for them. Edvinsson, you can't expect miracles from a guy like him. Yes, he paid his dues in the American Hockey League, but now he's up into the major leagues now where everybody's good, and he's going to have to learn by playing out there and getting his ice time. Johansson's the same way. Albert Johansson, he's been in the organization for 4 or 5 years right now, and it's time for him to show the management what he can do out there. Now, the positive is if those players can come in, Berggren too, if he can come in and provide offense, and the 2 defensemen we talked about can be steady there on the blue line and not make many mistakes, then those are positives and those are pluses for Detroit. But again, there's a lot of question marks out there. Again, and we'll talk about this probably a little later. Right now, the Red Wings don't have Mo Seider signed. We don't know when that'll happen. Steve Yzerman yesterday, I believe he said they're getting closer, which is a good sign. But I don't like players that miss training camp, to be honest with you, or preseason games. And you just fall behind. So to me, I would like to see that deal done sooner than later. And it never helps a player coming in late because it's like going to school, right? You come in 2 weeks after school starts, you're way behind. You can never catch up. So you just hope that everything will fall into place in the next week or so.
We mentioned the blue line there, and I think that there's a ton of questions surrounding the blue line, right? And that not necessarily that they're all going to be negative, but there are a lot of questions. Obviously, the Seider, contract is the biggest of those, but then you have Edvinsson getting legitimate minutes, as you mentioned there, and then kind of grouped in with that Johansson conversation is just like how often is he going to play? Like right now, they have 8 defensemen on the blue line. Just how do you see that shaking out? And I guess, what are your thoughts on this roster potentially being 12-8-3, which is what it stands right now?
Well, Scotty, I think the question mark is where are you going to get your offense from? And we mentioned Gostisbehere last year was a guy that really helped out on the power play, but take a look at the Red Wing defensemen right now. They're not really all goal scorers, right? And you can throw Seider in there as well, but you got Sherratt, you got Edvinsson, Petrie, Mata, Gustafsson. These guys are known for more of defensive-minded defensemen. They're not going to light it up offensively. So, the question I have is how many points are going to be generated from the defensemen? And in today's National Hockey League, you have to have at least 1 or 2 defensemen that can bring the puck up ice, help on the power play, get, 50, 60 assists a year. And I look at that group and I'm saying, wow, which one of those players are going to be able to do that? Or is it going to be a committee of everybody chipping in? And the way it looks to me is I'm hoping that it's a committee where everybody's chipping in offensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to like this roster as a whole and looking ahead to the season, who they are, what they are at this point, we know who's left and who they've brought in. Last year, they missed the playoffs on a tiebreaker, right? It was that awful tiebreaker where Tortorella didn't know that the Flyers were eliminated. They pulled their goalie, 91 points. It was a huge, huge improvement upon the year prior, but the sting of missing the playoffs, it still hurts to this day as a Red Wings fan. FanDuel has their over-under this year set at 90.5. So I guess what my question here is like, do you see them finally breaking through this year with the roster changes they made while also playing in one of the most difficult divisions in the NHL, that is the Atlantic?
Well, last year, my preseason prediction was they'll be in the mix at the end of the season, which they were, obviously. I'm predicting the same thing this year. I think it's a tough division that the Red Wings are in, unfortunately, the Atlantic Division. And the top teams in the division, they're not going anywhere. They're going to be where they're at, I think. You're not going to see any of those top teams fall back. With that said, I think Buffalo is going to be a little bit better this year. I think Ottawa should be a little bit better. Montreal's improving a little bit. And it's just going to be tough to try and get into the top 3. And then when you look at the other side, the Metropolitan Division, there are a lot of good teams over there that the Red Wings are going to have to compete with to try and make it in as a wild card if they don't get the top 3 in the Atlantic Division. So I think it's going to be tough. And even if they don't make it this year, what you want to see is this team play like they did in the last 2 weeks of the season. Where the game's on the line, they're competing hard every night. Not everything's going to go their way. And if they don't make it, it's not the end of the world. But I think they're good enough to be there in the end. And again, I think it's key. You have to win your divisional games. And when you play teams like Florida, who are the defending Stanley Cup champs, the Maple Leafs, the Bruins, the Tampa Bay Lightning, you have to get points somehow. And you have to try and play well against your divisional foes. And if they can do that, then again, they'll be right there in the mix.
Absolutely. We're going to head to another quick break. When we return, we're going to wrap up any remaining questions we have for Ken Kal, radio voice of the Detroit Red Wings. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Got to talk to you guys today about Game Time. They have this fun new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks has curation that makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and so much more. And Game Time also has this toggle that allows you to show the price of your ticket up front with no surprise fees at checkout. That's that all-in pricing toggle that you must turn on in order to use the feature. Get a panoramic view of your seat before you buy with Seat Views, and the lowest price guarantee means Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, while that Game Time ticket coverage means your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, what else you got for Ken Kal while we got him here so we can pick his brain?
Yeah, I mean, well, let's talk Raymond Insider, I guess. I mean, that's the big news story, obviously, within the organization. Raymond just gets 8 for 8, a little bit over 8. I guess before we get into Mo, let's give Raymond his credit here and celebrate that. Just kind of your initial reaction to the Raymond extension and what he means for this organization and this core going forward.
Well, I give Raymond a lot of credit because he stuck to his guns. He wanted a lot of money and he wanted a lot of term. And I guess in the end, that's what he got, right? And, knowing Steve Yzerman, he doesn't like giving out that much term. And you look at his signings and with the exception of Dylan Larkin, but for the most part, it's hard today to sign players to more than 6 years or even 5 years, because if something goes haywire, you don't want to get stuck with that contract, right? Raymond had a great year last year. He set career highs in goals with 31, assists 41, points in 72. And as I mentioned before, what I really liked about his play is that when Dylan Larkin went down, he took the team on his back and really out of all the players, and there were a lot of veterans on this team, he's the one that took the team on his back and really tried to make something happen. He stepped up his game. He scored big goals when they needed it. And he was the go-to player, kind of, so to speak. So I like that in a player. And now he's going to be a Red Wing for a long period of time. And now that he's got the money and the term, he's got to prove to not only the fans, but the management that he's worth every dollar. And, with a big contract comes big results, right? So I think everybody's counting on him to continue to improve each and every year and be the point guy that I think the team wants him to be.
Is there any concern level with you that Seider remains unsigned? Are you at this point like this is just negotiations and it'll get done before the season?
Well, I kind of compare Seider to Lidstrom, right? I mean, when Nick Lidstrom was here, he was really the guy that the Red Wings built their team around. Everyone could say it was Steve Yzerman or Sergei Fedorov, and those guys were really good, but Lidstrom was the key player. He was the guy, and even Yzerman said too, when Lidstrom was up for a contract, you got to pay the guy and you got to give him term because, the guy's important to the team. Well, I kind of look at Seider the same way. And really, when you think about what he's done since he played his first game with the Red Wings, he's never missed a game. He plays the toughest minutes on the blue line against the best players game in and game out. And he does everything that a number one goal defenseman should do. So right now, I can understand he probably wants 8 years and $9 million, whatever he's asking for. I don't know. Steve doesn't let me into his meetings, but I
he
wish
should.
We got to work on that. We got
to work on that. But no, I mean, the guy is going to be a Norris Trophy defenseman one day, and maybe win that multiple times. So when you look at players like that, it's not an easy situation. The player's looking at trying to get as much as he can and trying to get the term as long as he can. And management wants to try and keep some wiggle room in the cap space. And, it's a tough, hard negotiation. But in the end, it always seems to work out. And again, my hope is I hope they get this contract done within the next couple of weeks, because once you start getting 3-4 weeks or into the season, when a player misses training camp, misses preseason games. The body's not used to it. And you just fall behind, and it's hard to catch up when everybody's ahead of you. So I'm confident they'll get it done. Steve understands that. And again, these things aren't easy. Steve's looking at the overall big picture, what it's going to be like. And I think us as fans or broadcasters are looking in the now. It's like, let's get this guy signed. But, Steve's going to have to sign some players down the road, guys like Danielson and Mazur, and maybe some of these like Kosa and whoever that they're going to bring up down the road. And you got to make sure that you have enough money to pay them too when their contracts are up.
You bring up Mazur, bring up Danielson, and as we sit here and record this, training camp starts tomorrow. And a tweet just came out from Jordan Harris. He writes for Dobber Prospects. He's a European scout for them. And he said, comparing last year's training camp roster to this year's training camp roster, Finney and Mazur are listed up 12 pounds from the previous year. Edvinsson is up 13 pounds from last season, and Danielson is an inch shorter somehow, but is up 3 pounds. So when we're looking at this roster coming up, and obviously Edvinsson's on the roster, that's without a doubt in all of our minds that he's locked in to make and probably be the second pair left side D-man for this team this year. But I do genuinely think personally that guys like Mazur and Casper and maybe even Danielson, who showed flashes at those prospect games where there were shifts he could take over all on his own, I think they might have an outside chance of making the team and pushing for one of the veteran spots. Where do you stand on that? Who do you think, if anyone, is a threat to make the roster and push out a veteran?
Well, I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be hard for one of those young players, especially at the start of the season, to come in and win a job. I think the Red Wings are pretty much set where they're at right now. There's always injuries. There's always it's not a bad thing if those guys spend another year or a half a year in Grand Rapids. But I like the fact that the Red Wings are having a lot of depth right now. And you mentioned Finney. He looked terrific. They bumped him up on the top line when brandsegg-nygard couldn't play because he was a little bit tweaked up a little bit, but he stepped in and really played well on that top line and did a fantastic job. He had a couple of assists in that game, and I think he had a goal as well. So he was terrific. Danielson started off slow, I thought, but then as the games moved on, he was pretty good. And I thought the goaltending was good with Carter Geilander. There's another guy that is trying to win a job somewhere in the organization, and hopefully he gets some experience with either Toledo or with the Grand Rapids Griffins. But I like the overall depth. Mazur was a guy I thought last year going in, if he didn't get hurt, he would have an opportunity maybe to win a spot. I think they were really high on him. He plays kind of an abrasive game. You mentioned he got a little bit stronger this year, which is good. And Danielson actually played really well in the preseason games last year. He had 4 points, 2 goals, 2 assists, 6 shots on goal, a couple minutes in penalties. But he played good enough to where I think the coaches were looking at him and saying wow, he could be like a Dylan Larkin type where maybe we can't send him back, But another year of experience for Danielson's only going to help him out. So I just like the overall depth. And there's always injuries. There's always players that maybe get off the slow starts, and that's when maybe you bring up a guy and he can help you out. And the other player is Berggren. I think this is a big year for Jonathan Berggren. In the past, he has shown that he can put the puck in the net with the best of them. He had a terrific year in Grand Rapids, and now he has to do that in the NHL with Detroit.
Well, it's hockey season when Brian's bringing out height and weight for the players. That's this dude's favorite thing every year. Last year it was all Raymond, though. So we've widened the scope a little bit. We're getting some other players thrown in there.
Some reports had Raymond up 8. Some had him up 9. I was like, let's go. It's breakout year.
Over it. He was all over it.
Well, they're young bodies. They're young bodies. And each and every year that goes by, they're just going to develop and fill into that body. So, when you look at the Red Wings, especially the blue line core, they've got some big bodies back there. And when Seider comes back, Edvinsson's not a small guy either. And keep in mind, they've got Wallinder in Grand Rapids too. And, he's not a small defenseman either. Right. So they do have some size back there on the blue line.
Absolutely. Scotty, do you have any final thoughts or comments, questions for Ken before we let him travel back to Traverse City?
I don't think so. My last question was going to be about the prospects. So you went twice in a row, stole my question. So we're good.
All right. Sounds good.
Appreciate you as always, Ken.
Thank you so much.
Scotty, Brian, it's always a pleasure. And again, we're looking forward to a very good season. I know the fans are really interested in it. Don't forget, we've got the red carpet on opening night against Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's going to be a great opener. And really, when you look at the first several games of the year, there's some good teams coming into Little Caesars Arena with Nashville and the New York Rangers and New Jersey Devils. So there's another team that I think is going to be improved this year in the Metropolitan Division. So a lot of great hockey in the month of October, and we're really looking forward to the season starting in about 3.5 weeks.
Absolutely. All right. One last time, thank you so much, Ken. And to our Locked On Red Wings listeners, we'll be back tomorrow with probably recapping day one of training camp. So stay tuned. Well, again, barring a Moritz Seider. Right. It's also very possible, Ken, that we have to push this episode back if the Moritz Seider news breaks tonight.
That's right.
They did that to us 2 nights ago. We recorded a whole episode on Jonathan Berggren, and then an hour later they announced the Lucas Raymond contract. So,
well, I'll be honest with you guys. If you scratch me in favor of Moritz Seider, that's good. I'm all for it.
We would not scratch you. We would just maybe push you back a day. But barring Moritz Seider's contract dropping, we will see you guys on Friday with training camp day 1 recap. Same time, same place. It's your team every day.